So Devin has given Shakur the catch weight he has asked for. Now Shakur is a great boxer, so if he is still not signed, what is the holdup? It may not be fear, it may be money, leverage, and who really wants to compromise. So Bill Haney has been talking, and there has been some interesting narratives. So let's undress these narratives and give perspectives. And shout out to Bill because he has done a great job with his son. So let's get to his first statement that he made in an interview. And according to him, he stated that Devin has agreed to Shakur's 144-pound catchweight demand. So if Shakur won't sign, what is he waiting for? Now, when I look at this, I think of context. So my first question would be, what is the financial split of the contract? Is it 60-40? And to who gets the favor? Is it 50-50? If it's 60-40 in Devin's favor, then of course we would see what the discrepancy is. If it's 50-50, then again, Shakur may feel that he's taking the bigger risk and therefore deserves the bigger percentage. Also, when we look at contracts, it's not just the split, it's money through the front door and money through the back door. So it's not just the money that you get up front, but it's the percentage of the pay-per-view, it's the sponsorships, etc. It's a multitude of different things. And then when you think of signing a contract, we have to ascertain who is the A side. And if we have a disagreement on who is the A side, then we're going to have a fundamental disagreement on the contract. So for example, if you think you're the A side, then you're going to want 60-40, 70-30. But if the opponent or the opposing team doesn't agree with that premise, then we have some contention. Also, it's important to remember that reluctance to sign does not mean fear. It just may mean that the terms have not been agreed. So it's not that they're scared to fight. It means that the terms haven't been agreed. And I guess a question for Haney is he or they, the team, willing to compensate economically to get the fight? Because Shakur Stevenson, you could make an argument, is the undefeated fighter, has perhaps more to lose. They both have things to lose, but perhaps Shakur Stevenson has more to lose at this stage of their career. So is he willing to make that financial compromise? Now, the next statement from Bill is calling Shakur easy work. And this clearly to me is a pressure tactic to make him either sign or explain his silence. So he's not conceding that this would be a difficult fight, because in the eyes of the fans, this could be a 50-50 fight, or maybe some people think Shakur will be the slight favorite. But by Bill Haney declaring that this is easy work, it's actually good marketing for the fight. And again, we get back to who is taking the bigger risk. And I think there's a compelling argument that Shakur Stevenson is taking the bigger risk. Who has more to gain? And who needs the fight more? I think perhaps Devin Haney, at this point of his career, he needs this fight more than Shakur Stevenson does. And plus, there's a bigger risk. So I guess if I was in Shakur Stevenson's corner, if I was entertaining this fight, then the financial element of this fight would need to reflect the risk that's being taken. And then in the next statement, Bill uses the garage gym versus the Mayweather gym comparison to question whether Shakur's boxing education holds up under elite pressure. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, was Tio not elite pressure? You could argue that Tio is a good fighter, perhaps a great fighter. And let me give a concession. I think that we can say that Devin is a good fighter, perhaps a great fighter. Perhaps you can say he's an elite fighter. But he's elite in terms of being a boxer, being able to adapt. He is not a pressure fighter. So if we take the word pressure and we define it in a way as a boxer who will pressure you to fight, typically we don't define Devin as an elite pressure fighter. There's a difference between an elite boxer and elite fighter, an elite pressure fighter. So this is kind of confusing to me, and maybe I've misunderstood the context. Many people, I think, would assume that if Devin was to take this fight, he would box because that is his identity. Now, of course, different boxing matches can bring out different styles. So maybe Devin would be a pressure fighter. Maybe he would fight inside the pocket. But there's a difference between adapting your style to fit the opponent and being categorized as elite, as a pressure fighter. So let's not make any mistakes here. I'm saying that you can make an argument that Devin is a good fighter, a great fighter, an elite boxer, but I wouldn't define him as an elite pressure boxer. So Bill spoke directly about Haymon and about Tank, and that now my understanding here is that he says that no rehydration clause was mentioned, which the way I've defined that is that when they're discussing the possibilities of the fight taking place will not have a rehydration clause. So let's deal with that point first. Rehydration clauses, I think, are dangerous. And when we look at the last big event that was a rehydration clause, I think of Eubank versus Connor. And even though the first fight was a great fight, the rehydration clause, yes, it kind of added more narrative to an already a great story, but it also added additional danger to what is a dangerous sport. So I'm not a massive fan of rehydration clauses. However, if you sign a contract to accept a rehydration clause, you also have to take accountability. But I think that the boxing infrastructure needs to look at rehydration clauses to ensure that they are safe. So that's the rehydration clause element. With regards to the Tank fight, that's a great fight, because when you take Tank, you have a really good counterpuncher and a really strong puncher. And I think Tank's power and Tank's personality actually makes this a really interesting fight. So I'd be interested in this, but I definitely would not. My interest would lessen if there's a rehydration clause. And it sounds like Bill would go into this only if there is not a rehydration clause. So that's a good thing. And then Bill talks about the Xander Zayas and Boots fight, and he feels that Zayas showed a blueprint on how to beat Boots. And his premise was make him think, adapt, and lose control. Here's my perspective on that. I feel that Boots is a boxer that sometimes likes to stay in the pocket. Therefore, what happens if you stay in the pocket? If you stay in the pocket at close distance, you increase the opportunity of getting hit. Therefore, Boots staying in the pocket is not a weakness. It's a byproduct of his personality/style. So I don't think this reveals a weakness. It just reveals a part of his boxing identity. And I think there's been way too much criticism of Boots Ennis, because I think Boots Ennis had a dominant performance against Zayas. And I think also Zayas had a great performance as well. I think they both shined in that fight, and it was an incredible fight. But to suggest that him being hurt in the third round, and I think he may have been hurt twice in that third round, to create that narrative bias that that's a weakness, I think is a mistake, because the reality is that yes, he was hurt in the third round, but he regained total control and dominated in rounds 4, 5, and 6. And then the next part is Bill talks about Keshan Davis being the mandatory, and he states that a belt can become a trap instead of a power moves. I agree with the premise that mandatories can be problematic. If you look at the Usyk situation, it appears that the mandatories, or the multitude of mandatories, create some problems. But I don't understand how this makes a fight with Keshan problematic. Again, I might have misread the context. And this seems kind of dismissive, because Keshan is a fighter that's really building his credibility and is really well respected. And then the next thing is that Devin, and this is Bill Haney talking about Devin's Mount Rushmore dream. And when we talk about the Mount Rushmore, we're talking about the best of the best, the top of the top. And he says that it depends on landing names like Tank and Shakur, not just calling them out. And that is important, but I guess to land those big fights, you need to market those fights and you need to create those viral moments. And in fairness, I feel that Bill understands marketing, and I think he's done a great job in marketing his son. So he understands that it's about landing the fights, but part of landing the fights is to create that marketing machine, to create those viral moments. And in landing those fights, it's important to establish who needs who more. I think with the Shakur Stevenson fight, I think there's going to have to be a compromise to get him in the ring because he's taking the greater risk. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that Devin Haney is a great boxer. He's a high-level skilled operator. So let's understand the credibility that he brings into the ring. But then another part of Devin Haney, which perhaps, I don't like to use the word criticize, but something we can point out or maybe ask the question, is Devin Haney entertaining? And I think Devin Haney is entertaining to the boxing purist, but he's not entertaining to the casual fan. And I feel that that's kind of put Bill in a compromising position because he has to create that virality. He has to create the controversy. And when you look at Devin Haney as a boxer, does the action that he brings in the ring, is that viral? Is that bringing attention? And if the answer to that is no, then inevitably to land these big fights, he may have to compromise in the contracts. And then the next question from that is, how important is this opportunity to Devin Haney? Is it about the money? Boxing is entertainment. Entertainment is business. There is a relationship. You need to have your finances, you need to have your finances correct. But at the same time, which one is more important? The money or the cultural impact or the desire to be great? So here is my final statement. Think of this. Devin gave Shakur the catchweight he asked for. So now the silence becomes louder. That does not mean fear, because it could be money. It could be leverage. Now both men are skillful. Both are elite boxers. That is why the fight matters. Bill calling Shakur easy work is pressure. Sign or explain why not. Because if both sides really want greatness, somebody has to compromise and take the risk. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community, and that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.